طيب، بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما إلى علمنا. السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. Inshallah, نركز. Today we'll focus on those 4 hadith. We took one of them already, the hadith of Nafi' Mawla Abdullah ibn Umar and Umar ibn al-Khattab. We took that one already. من يلا محمد حديث نافع.
قال حدثنا مالك عن نافع عن مولى عبد الله بن عمر أن عمر بن الخطاب رضي الله عنه كتب إلى أماله أن أهم من عند الصلاة من حفظها أو حافظ عليها حفظ دينه ومن ضيعها فهو لما سواه أضيع. ثم كتب أن صلوا الظهر إذا كان الفيء ذراعا إلى أن يكون ظل أحدكم مثله.
إذا كان الظل
أحدكم
مثله.
والعصر والشمس بيضاء نقية قدر ما يسير الراكب 3 فرسخين 3. والمغرب إذا غربت الشمس والعشاء إذا غاب الشفق إلى نصف إلى ثلث الليل. فمن نام فلا نامت عينه وصلي الصبح والنجوم
بادية مشتبه. نعم. ثم بعده حديث أبي سهيل.
أبو موسى.
لا، كلها عن
مالك.
لا كلها حدثنا مالك.
نعم. عن أبي سهيل ابن عن أبي سهيل عن عمه أبي سهيل ابن مالك عن أبيه أن عمر بن الخطاب كتب إلى أبي موسى العشري أن صلي الظهر إذا زاغت الشمس والعصر والشمس بيضاء نقية قبل أن يدخلها الصفرة والمغرب وصلي المغرب إذا غربت الشمس وآخر العشاء ما لم تنم ولا تكن من الغافلين.
وصلي الصبح
والشمس بادية ولا تكن من الغافلين. واقرأ بسورتين طويلتين من المفصل.
واقرأ فيها بسورتين طويلتين من المفصل. ثم بعده حديث قال أبو مصعب حدثنا مالك عن هشام بن عروة عن أبيه أن عمر بن الخطاب كتب إلى أبي موسى الأشعري أن صلي العصر أن صلي العصر والشمس بادية والشمس بيضاء نقية قدر ما يسير الراكب 3 فراسخ وأن صلي العتم ما بينك وبين ثلث الليل فإن وصل العتم ما بينك وبين ثلث الليل فإن نمت وإن أخرت فإلى شطر الليل ولا تكن من الغافلين. ثم في هذه الرواية they mentioned the hadith of Anas, but we're putting the hadith of Anas off and we're bringing up the hadith of Abi Hurairah, and that's the way it is in the riwayah of Yahya bin Yahya. They put the hadith that are similar together. Hadith Abi Hurairah قال حدثنا يزيد بن زياد عن يزيد بن زياد
مولى أم سلمة.
لا عن
عبد الله بن نافع
ابن رافع
عن عبد الله بن رافع مولى أم سلمة أنه سأل أبا هريرة رضي الله عنه عن وقت الصلاة فقال أبو هريرة رضي الله عنه فأنا أخبرك أن صلي الظهر إذا كان ظلك مثلك وصلي العصر إذا كان ظلك مثليك والمغرب إذا غربت الشمس والعشاء ما بينك وبين ثلث الليل فإن نمت فنامت عينك
لا، فإن نمت في إلى
فإلى فإلى نصف الليل.
والعشاء ما بينك وبين ثلث الليل.
فإن نمت إلى نصف الليل فنامت عينك وصلي الصبح بغلس.
نعم. فهذه أربعة. These four ahadith are the ones that we're focusing on. We talked about last time the hadith of Nafi' and we finished from it. And then we started last time, we said the hadith of Nafi', if we remember, we said it was munqati' because Nafi' lam yudrik, or mursal khafi is better. Nafi', he didn't reach Umar ibn al-Khattab. And we talked about how it's connected from other chains. And then we talked about after that the hadith of the uncle of Malik, Abi Suhail, Nafi' ibn Malik ibn Abi Amir, rahimahullah ta'ala, on his father, أن عمر بن الخطاب كتب إلى أبي موسى الأشعري أن صلي الظهر إذا زاغت الشمس. And so we talked about how this hadith, even though, well, we talked about the people in this hadith last time. We talked about the people in this hadith. So we said Abu Suhail, his name was Nafi' ibn Malik ibn Abi Amir al-Asbahi. And we said Abi Suhail, the uncle of Malik, right, the brother of Anas, had another two brothers, Uwais, who was the youngest of them, and Rabi'ah, who was the oldest. So you had Rabi'ah ibn Malik and Anas ibn Malik and Uwais ibn Malik and Abi Suhail ibn Malik. And I think Abi Suhail or Uwais was the youngest. I want to say Abi Suhail was the youngest. Nafi' was the youngest. Abi Suhail, Nafi' ibn Malik, was from the Sigar al-Tabi'in. And he died sometime after the year 140 from the scholars of Medina. He narrates on his father, Malik ibn Abi Amir. Malik ibn Abi Amir, who was from the elder Tabi'in, from those who reached Umar and were the companions of Umar, and from the companions of Uthman. And he died in the year 74 after the Hijrah. From his relationship is that it said he is one of the people who carried and buried Uthman, who washed his body, and he is one of the people that copied down the Masahif for Uthman. When it was time to send it to the different cities, he was one of the people who copied it down after it was gathered. Malik ibn Abi Amir al-Asbahi. It's said that his father was a Sahabi, Abi Amir. It's said that he accepted Islam and was a Sahabi, and he witnessed all of the battles after Badr. And others say no, the first of them to accept Islam or to come to Medina was Malik ibn Abi Amir. So we talked about those people in the chain. We said that this chain from Abi Suhail and Abihi Malik, أن عمر بن الخطاب كتب إلى أبي موسى الأشعري, that Umar ibn al-Khattab wrote to Abi Musa al-Ash'ari. We said that this narration, although it seems to be from the action of a Sahabi, and we call the actions and the statements of the Sahabi, we call this mawquf. We said that as it relates to it being a proof, then the statements, the actions of the Sahaba were proofs in several circumstances. And from the circumstances that we mentioned, when a Sahabi's statement or action is a proof, is when it is something that is not based in opinion, something that there is no room for opinion to have reached such a decision. And so this is the case in this narration. Umar, radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he does not know the times of salat on his own. It's impossible. And so it shows us that although this is his statement, it has the same ruling of a hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so we see here how it proves the times of salah. We said that Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, his name was Abdullah ibn Qais. Abdullah ibn Qais, and he was the emir of Kufa for Umar from the year 17 to the year 23. And then after that, he took over Basra for Uthman around the year 27 until Uthman died around the year 35. And then after that, he was one of the delegates on the side of Ali radiallahu ta'ala an during the battle known as Siffin, when they appointed the two judges. Muawiyah appointed Amr ibn al-As, and Ali appointed Abu Musa al-Ash'ari from the Qudha of the Sahaba, from the judges and the more noble and scholarly of the Sahaba, and from those who possessed the best of recitations. Some of them said he had the best recitation from them. And we said that Abu Musa al-Ash'ari radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, he died in the year 50, somewhere around the year 50. From the things that are interesting is that he and his predecessor died around the same time. What do we mean by he and his predecessor? His predecessor in Kufa was al-Mughira ibn Shu'bah. He was the judge in Kufa before him. And al-Mughira ibn Shu'bah was also one of the people in charge of Basra before him. And al-Mughira ibn Shu'bah, as we all remember, he died in the year 50 as well. He died in the year 50 as well, or in the approximation around the year 50. So, Umar ibn al-Khattab كتب إلى أبي موسى الأشعري أن صلي الظهر إذا زاغت الشمس. He wrote to him telling him to pray dhuhr when the sun zagh. Zagh yazighu, it means to lean or to incline, right? فَلَمَّا زَاغُوا أَزَاغَ اللَّهُ قُلُوبَهُم. And so when they inclined away from, or they leaned away from the haqq, Allah caused their hearts to lean away from the haqq. And so Umar is telling him in this narration, صَلِّ الظُّهُرِ إِذَا زَاغَتِ الشَّمْسِ, when the sun leans. We talked about in the last narration how Umar wrote to his ummal, إِذَا كَانَ الْفَيْ ذِرَاعٍ. صَلِّ الظُّهُرِ إِذَا كَانَ الْفَيْ ذِرَاعٍ. And in the narration of Abu Hurairah, we're going to see that Abu Hurairah says, صَلِّ الظُّهُرِ إِذَا كَانَ الظِّلُّ أَحَدِكُمْ مِثْلَهُ. And so here we have three different scenarios. We have Umar saying, pray dhuhr when the sun's shadow, or the fay, the shadow cast by the sun, equals a dhira', which is a cubit, a fourth of the height of an object above its dhuhr shadow, right? The shadow that it has at dhuhr, when it reaches a fourth times greater than that object, then it is time to pray dhuhr. And then you have in this narration, he says, when the thing reaches its dhuhr shadow, the shadow, whatever shadow it has at dhuhr time specifically, إِذَا زَاغَتِ الشَّمْسِ. And then we have the narration of Abu Hurairah, when the shadow's object reaches the same length of its dhuhr shadow. So how do we put all of these three things together? Is it all one? How are all of these three things the time for dhuhr? Right? It becomes necessary to understand that Umar radiyallahu ta'ala anhu is writing to different people, and Abu Hurairah as well is talking to different people about different circumstances. So in the writing of Umar to his ummal, in the hadith of Nafi', he is writing to the people in charge of the masajid and the communities that pray dhuhr when the shadow reaches a fourth of the height of the object after its dhuhr shadow. And this is so that the people in the communities have time to make it to the masjid, and you're taking into consideration those who might stay a distance, or those who take small steps, or those who have difficulty moving. They have time to make it to the masjid. As far as in the hadith of Umar writing to Abi Musa, and we talked about how Umar and Abu Musa had a close relationship, and they would often write back and forth to each other. And this shows us that Umar was well aware of the circumstances of Abi Musa. And so from the things that he wrote to Abu Musa was about the beginning of the time. And صَلِّ الظُّهُرِ إِذَا زَاغَتِ الشَّمْسِ. So the hadith of Abi Musa, here from Abi Suhail is Umar writing to Abi Musa about the beginning of the time. While in the previous narration, he was writing to his governors about when to establish it in the masajid. And as far as the hadith of Abi Hurairah that we're going to come to, we're going to see that Abu Hurairah, when he is talking to Abdullah ibn Rafi', then he's telling him about the time that he should pray by. The time that he should pray by. Meaning make sure you pray dhuhr by this time. I.e. the end of the time is either kana dhillu ahadikum mithla. When the shadow of one of you reaches a similar height. And that's because Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala anhu, as it relates to Abdullah ibn Rafi', he knew about him from his circumstances, that which used to cause him to be delayed in praying dhuhr. And would have to put dhuhr off, not at the beginning of its time, but at the end of its time. And so it's necessary that all of these ahadith be understood in this context. Fadl.
I think I only got two from the three. From Nafir is when the shadow
إذا كان الفيء ذراع إلى أن يكون ظل أحدكم مثله. So the hadith of Nafi' on Abdullah and on Umar is the best time for the community to the end. Because he says إلى أن يكون ظل أحدكم مثله. Then you got the hadith of Abi Suhail and Abihi and Umar ibn al-Khattab katabi ila Abi Musa. That is the beginning of the time only. إذا زاغت الشمس. He only mentions the beginning of the time in that narration. And then you have the hadith of Hisham ibn Urwa and Abihi and Umar, but he doesn't mention dhuhr in that one. And then you have the hadith of Abi Hurairah, where Abdullah ibn Rafi' asked him about the times of salah, and he says to him, only the end. And it's important that we understand that it's only the end, because there's going to be some disagreement about the next time mentioned in the hadith of Abi Hurairah, but we'll deal with that in a second. So the point of it is that by putting all of these hadith together, you understand what's going on. Because if not, a person might say, well, all of these times are different. But they're not different in the beginning and the end. The beginning and the end go back to the original hadith that we said Malik drew our attention to, although he didn't mention it, which was the hadith of Abdullah bin Amr bin al-As about the times of salah. He just mentioned it from the hadith of Abi Mas'ud al-Ansari. But the hadith in detail is the hadith of Abdullah bin Amr bin al-As, where Jibril came and prayed with the Prophet twice for 5 times. Anyway, so the hadith of Umar, we have to understand it in this fashion. One of them is telling us the best time with the community. The other one is telling us the beginning. The other one is telling us, i.e. the hadith of Abi Hurairah, the end. And when we understand that, we understand a couple of benefits. From the benefits is being conscious of that which is best for the community. And this is something that the Prophet ﷺ kana yura'i an-nas fi as-salah. He used to pay attention to the condition of the people in salah. And so if it was hot, he would delay dhuhr. And in the winter, he would pray dhuhr in its earlier time. And for salat al-isha, he would delay it as much as possible, as long as the people weren't overtaken by sleep. And like this, the person in charge should always be considerate of what's best for the community. And there's no harm in adjusting the time for the community. Another benefit that we get from this aspect of the hadith up until this point is subhanallah. Subhanallah, it just floated out of my mind. It'll come back to me. طيب. And so we see that another benefit besides the one that floated out of my mind is the times of dhuhr, as we've already talked about. Now, طيب. After that, Umar, he says, وَالْعَصْرِ وَالشَّمْسُ بيضاء نقية قبل أن يدخلها الصفرة. and pray. Oh, that's the benefit I missed out on. The benefit that I missed out on was making judgments based on the condition of the person specifically. Right? When you talk to somebody, it's not enough to know the religious rule, but you have to know the condition of the individual that you are speaking to. Because the individual that you are giving the rule to, the way he is going to apply that rule, it's necessary for you to take that into consideration when you're giving him the rule. So Abu Hurairah, for example, and likewise Umar, when talking to Abu Musa, they answered the question, or they made the statement based on what they knew from the person's situation. Umar, knowing the situation of Abu Musa, is telling him to pray at the beginning of the time. And Abu Hurairah, knowing the situation of Abdullah ibn Rafi', is telling him to pray at the end of the time. And this is because what they know of the circumstance of the one that they're talking to. Likewise, the Prophet ﷺ, he told Abu Hurairah said, my best friend advised me with 3 things, and one of them was to pray witr before I go to bed. This was the consideration given to Abu Hurairah because the Prophet knew his circumstance and that Abu Hurairah would go to bed early. Or some of them would say, no, Abu Hurairah would go to bed late. And so that's why the Prophet told him to pray before he goes to bed, because it was at the later portion of the night. But in any circumstance, the point of it is that when you're answering questions or you're giving advice, it's not sufficient to know the general answer. You have to know how to apply that answer to the person that you're answering the question for, or the person that you're giving the advice to. And that's an example of this in this circumstance. And this is something that a lot of people, they abandon in giving advice. They don't adhere to it when giving advice. And they don't utilize it when answering questions. Somebody asks them, what's the ruling about this or that? And they just answer with the general rule without knowing how to put the two together. And for this reason, some of our teachers, they used to say, in order to give a fatwa, you need 3 things. Knowledge of the situation, knowledge of the one asking the question, and knowledge of how to put the 2 of them together. You need knowledge of the situation, knowledge of the one asking the question, the condition of the one who is asking the question, and knowledge of how to put the 2 of them together. And this is derived from the statement of Allah, قُلْ هَذِهِ سَبِيلِي أَدْعُو إِلَى اللَّهِ عَلَى بَصِيرَةً أَنَا وَمَنِ اتَّبَعَنِي أو أَدْعُو إِلَى اللَّهِ عَلَى بَصِيرَةً أَنَا وَمَنِ اتَّبَعَنِي. Say, this is my straight path. I call to Allah on clear-sightedness, I and those that follow me. They say clear-sightedness is clear-sightedness in what you're calling to. Al-basiratu fil mad'u ilay. Right? And what you're calling to. You need to know what you're calling to. Wal-basira fi hal ad-da'i. And clear-sightedness in the qualities of a caller. How should you be when calling? Wal-basira fi hal al-mad'u ilay. As well as clear-sightedness in the qualities or the condition of the one that you're calling. So these narrations, they show us to reflect on this as well. He says, وَأَنْ صَلِّ الظُّهْرِ وَأَنْ صَلِّ الْعَصْرِ وَالْعَصْرِ وَالشَّمْسُ بَيْضَاءُ نَقِيَّةٌ قَبْلَ أَنْ يَدْخُلَهَا الصُّفْرَةُ. And pray Asr, وَالشَّمْسُ بَيْضَاءُ نَقِيَّةٌ. These 2 qualities, we mentioned them before in the hadith of Nafi'. Bayda, i.e. the sun is white. And the sun will only be white when it is high in the sky in its earliest time. Naqiyya, without any blemishes. It's pure. It's not tainted in any way. It doesn't have any other shades in it, nor does the sky have any other hues in it. There is no other colors present. قَبْلَ أَنْ يَدْخُلُهَا أو أَنْ يَدْخُلَهَا الصُّفْرَةُ. And this is before the yellow enters into it. When the sun finally starts its final descent to setting, you'll see the color of the sun turn yellow. And the sky will develop those hues in it. Those pinks, those oranges that will be in the western sky. This is when the sun is making its final descent to set. And so Umar is telling Abu Musa to pray Asr before that time. i.e. pray Asr in its earliest time, وَالشَّمْسُ بَيْضَاء نَقِيَّةٌ كما قالت عائشة رضي الله تعالى عنها in that first hadith from Urwa, أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم كان يصلي العصر والشمس في حجرتها قبل أن تظهر. Right, and the sun would still be in her room before it would leave her room. It's still so early in the day that it's still above her room like it would be during Dhuhr time. And we mentioned that from the scholars are those that say that Dhuhr and Asr, they actually share that time. That the two times are actually one. The end of Dhuhr and the beginning of Asr, they are one time. So you can pray Dhuhr and Asr at the same time. Meaning not together, not pray Dhuhr and Asr as 4 rak'at only, but you could pray Dhuhr on time during that period and Asr on time during that period, and in neither one of them be considered late or early. And that is that period, as is mentioned in the hadith of Umar on Nafi' and the hadith of Abi Hurairah, إِذَا كَانَ ظِلُّ أَحَدِكُمْ مِثْلَ, when the shadow of one of you reaches its same length. And this length that the shadow reaches, like we talked about in the hadith of Nafi', is when the shadow reaches the length of the item above the size of the shadow in the beginning of the time. So when the sun zaghat, when the sun moves, the shadow turns from east to west. And it went from being long to short. We call that what? Anybody remember? No. If the fay is on this side is called the what? The dhil, right? So the dhil, ma nasakhathu shams, right? The dhil is what the sun erases. It starts off long and then it gets shorter. Then once the shadow flips, it becomes the fay. Wal fay'u ma nasakhat shams is what erases the sun. The shadow gets longer and longer. So when the sun zaghat, when it moves to the other side, once whatever item you're using to measure, once the shadow of that item is 1 times longer than whatever the shadow was at the beginning of Dhuhr, then that is the end of Dhuhr and the beginning of Asr. And that's why Umar, he says, وَصَلِّ الْعَصْرِ وَالشَّمْسُ بَيْضَاء نَقِيَّةٌ قَبْلَ أَنْ يَدْخُلُهَا الصُّفْرَةُ. In the narration of Hisham ibn Urwa, he says, وَالْعَصْرِ إِذَا كَانَ ظِلُّكَ وَالْعَصْرِ وَالشَّمْسُ بَيْضَاءُ نَقِيَّةٌ وَالشَّمْسُ بَيْضَاء نَقِيَّةٌ. The same thing, right? وَالشَّمْسُ بَيْضَاء نَقِيَّةٌ قَدْرَ مَا يَسِيرُ الرَّاكِبُ ثَلَاثَ فَرَاسِخ. And in the hadith of Nafi', he said, فَرْسَخَيْن أو ثَلَاثَ. And in the version of Yahya ibn Yahya, قَبْلَ الْغُرُوبِ. And it's necessary that we remember that addition. The distance that a traveler can travel 2 or 3 farsakh, 2 or 3 leagues, parasangs, which is the equivalent of about 9 miles before the sun sets. So the amount of time that a person would have from when Asr entered until praying Asr, until finishing Asr, and then traveling 9 miles after that would be about the amount of time that an individual could travel 3 farsakh. And we said every farsakh was a 3 miles. And like we said, if we look at that, how long does it take an individual walking on a horse? Somewhere between 2 to 4 miles an hour. That means it would take a horse, if it's going to go 15 miles, it would take a horse at best 4 miles an hour, 3, maybe 4 hours. If you're going at a gait, maybe 3 hours, 2.5 hours. And when we look at our time between Dhuhr and Asr, we see that that's approximately what we have. So for today, Dhuhr came in at 12:45. We pray at 1:05. We're done at 1:15. If you add 2 hours to that, it would become 3:15. 2.5 hours, 3:45. That's the adhan for Asr. And so we see that even though all of these things are approximations and they're not meant to be specific moments in time, we see from all of that the Sahaba were very good at approximating these things. But from the benefits that we take from it is that all of these things were what? They were approximations. So it's not something that they didn't judge time in seconds, in milliseconds, and these small increments that we judge time in. They did it by approximation. They did it by look. They did it by just about. And this is good enough, right? We don't have to be pig-headed in the way that we apply the Sharia, right? And this becomes important in circumstances where we see nowadays where everybody has these apps and everybody has the phone. And if I prayed a minute before or a minute after, is the salat invalid? If I ate a minute before, a minute after, is my fasting invalid? These are things that the general answer and the safety is, if you rely on a chart or a clock or an app to follow the chart, the clock, or the app that you rely on. But to invalidate or to nullify based on the chart or the app, then that is not the criteria to make such determinations. And these things are approximations. And so you have to be careful when telling something to somebody else or even enforcing it on yourself. Oh no, you have to pray over again, or you prayed too early. And this is because the charts, the clocks, the apps, there are disagreements in them. My app will go off 2 minutes before your app. My daughter and I in the same home, every morning we get up to pray Fajr. She prays Fajr 2 minutes before me, because her app upstairs is before mine by 2 minutes. And so I ask her, did you pray? She said, yeah, I prayed already. I said, how did you pray? That I just came in. I just finished. You didn't finish before me. I prayed at this time, because hers came in 2 minutes before mine. Do I tell her you need to go redo it? You prayed too early. The salat you have to judge yourself on is the time I prayed. I said, this is approximation, right? This is an approximation. But for that reason, we'll see why some of the scholars preferred certain actions to make sure they did things correctly. And that is the difference. The difference isn't to allow us to take things lightly and to be nonchalant about it and to not care, because the Sahaba and the Salaf were precise. We talked about how Umar ibn Abdul Aziz made a way to recognize when Asr came in after Urwa told him the hadith. So the issue is not to take it lightly and to be negligent, but to know that this is an approximation, so know the signs to be sure about it. When am I sure Fajr came in? When am I sure Dhuhr came in? When am I sure Asr came in? And like this, we find the variations and the alterations of the narrations. And Salli Dhuhr idha zaghat ash-shams.
Question about, we said that al-dhil is when it's...
What erases, what the sun erases.
That's before Dhuhr.
Before Dhuhr.
When it says إِذَا كَانَ ذِلُّ أَحَدِكُمْ مِثْلَ, is it below, or is it...
There, it's just using it both ways. So this is something you'll notice in Arabic, and this is an important conversation. Now you guys will move from fiqh to hadith. Riwayat al-hadith bil-ma'na. Narrating a hadith by meaning. Permissible or not permissible? Permissible. Right? A lot of scholars say narrating a hadith by meaning is permissible, as long as you know the meanings of what you're saying and you don't narrate it in a way that alters the meaning. So that's the first thing. The second thing is the usage of words. Sometimes a word, when used by itself, can mean more than just what it means, while when used with another word means something specific, like Islam and Iman, Bir and Taqwa, right? When used together, they mean different things. When used independently, they mean the same thing. So when you're reading a hadith, the first thing is, generally speaking, a hadith is not a reference for language. A hadith is not a reference for language, whether it be grammar or even vocabulary, because hadith were narrated by meaning. And so because this possibility exists, and the stronger opinion is that it is permissible to narrate by meaning, it becomes problematic to use the hadith as a evidence in language, as opposed to the Quran, right? Because the Quran is infallible in its words, but the hadith are not. This narrator might have used this word because that's the closest word to what he could remember when he narrated it. And was it wa, or was it fa, was it dhil, was it fay? It's all the same. And we see that not just with the early narrators, but even in this book, the Muwatta, right? How many of them use different words, as we're going to see in the hadith of Abi Hurairah, وَصَلَّ الصُّبْحَ بِغَبَشْ بِغَبِس بِغَلَس. Right? Which one was it? They all the same, right? So we don't want to be too precise as it comes to the words of hadith. Well, if we said this word meant this, then how could that word be used in this context this way? You see what I'm saying? Because maybe it was narrated by meaning. But we also don't want to disregard the linguistical value of the hadith, which is to not know what the words mean. You see what I'm saying? So when we know that the word fay linguistically can mean this, and we see it in the hadith, then we'll point to that benefit. But if we see it in another hadith where they mention the word dhil, then we might disregard that benefit because this person probably narrated it by meaning, or in his opinion, because another thing about language is that there's disagreement. And just because, as we'll see with ghabis and ghabish and ghalis, just because one person says something about it doesn't mean they all agree that that's what it means. So somebody might say dhil means both of them. You see what I'm saying? And then there's no harm in the narration there. How do you figure out? The best technique to figure out, the first and foremost technique, is to look at the Quran. Because Allah selected the words that He uses perfectly, right? So see how Allah used the word dhil in the Quran, right? And obviously, another thing that we understand is that there's a dhil with no sun. Does the dhil, when we say that the definition of a dhil is what the sun erases, can't there be a dhil with no sun? سبعة يظلهم الله في ظله يوم لا ظل إلا ظله. Right? So we know that there's going to be a more detailed definition, but by looking at the Quran, we'll see how it uses the words, and then we'll see how the poets use the words, and then we'll see what the dictionaries, the classical dictionaries, say about them. But that doesn't stop us from looking at a benefit when saying, okay, if somebody uses these two words in context, dhil and fay, what's the difference between them? You see what I'm saying? But it doesn't mean that the difference is always going to be something that is thought of.
So here in this context, it's just shadow.
It's just shadow, yeah. So, صَلِّ الظُّهْرِ إِذَا زَاغَتِ الشَّمْسِ. Right? We've understood that. وَالْعَصْرِ وَالشَّمْسُ بَيْضَاء نَقِيَّةً قَبْلَ أَنْ يَدْخُلُهَا الصُّفْرَةِ. وأن صلي وأن صلي المغرب إذا غربت الشمس. وهذا سهل. This is the easiest of them, right? وصلي المغرب وأن صلي المغرب إذا غربت الشمس, when the sun sets, i.e. إذا تم وحققت غروبها, when it is completely set and its setting is something that has completed and been known for sure, then this is the time. Then this is the time for Maghrib. وَأَنْ صَلِّ الْمَغْرِبِ إِذَا غَرَبَتِ الشَّمْسِ. And that's why all of the narrations يَتَّفِقُونَ فِي هَذا. Instead, even the narration of Abdullah bin Amr bin al-As, where the Prophet prayed twice with Jibreel alayhi salatu wasalam, they only mention one time for Maghrib. And this leads to ikhtilaf. And that ikhtilaf is, does Maghrib have an extended period of time or not? So from the scholars are those that say that Maghrib does not have an extended period of time. And it is necessary, wajib, to pray Maghrib when it first comes in. And the only allowance you have in delaying Maghrib is the amount of time it takes you to do whatever you need to do to pray Maghrib. And that is an opinion that is attributed to the Shafi'i and others, and even the Malikiyah from them are those that say, no, Maghrib only has one time. Because in all of the narrations, it only mentions one time for Maghrib. Fadal.
So, is there like a unanimous agreement or like ijma that it's all the way until the time of Aisha? Or
No, it's not ijma.
It's not. Okay.
It's not ijma. That's what we say. Some scholars say it only has one time. Right? The time for Maghrib, because in the hadith of Jibreel, praying with the Prophet, on Maghrib, he prayed Maghrib both days the same time. So some of them say it's only this time. And the only amount of time you can delay is the amount of time necessary to do whatever it takes to pray. So you can delay the amount of a adhan, a walk to the masjid, a wudu, a rak'atayn, and iqamah, right? If it's Ramadan, a slight iftar, right? But can you, for example, our Maghrib today, according to the chart, comes in at 6:08 and it leaves at 7:21, right? Can I pray Maghrib at 7:15? I say, la, ma yajuz, right? And they say it's not permissible. While others, they say, no, Maghrib is like other than it. It has an extended time. And this is because the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, when he was asked about delaying Fajr that day, he said, "Laysat tafritu fin nawm." There's no negligence in sleep. Instead, negligence is that you delay one salat until the next one enters. What does that prove?
That you let it pass.
Okay, it proves the ending of the time period. It proves negligence.
Yeah.
What else does it prove?
That it's like a prescribed time. It has to be.
That's the same thing.
No.
Negligence is that you delay one salat until the next one enters.
Did you delay it without excuse?
It's the same thing. When to pray. Think about it from the aspect of time. We're talking about time. That you delay one salat until the next one enters.
What was the question?
What does that prove? That you delay one salat until the next one enters. It proves that all of the salat are what?
Invalid.
Connected.
Oh.
That you delay one until the next one enters. That is negligence. So you have all the way up until the next one enters to pray. That shows you that all of the times are what? Connected. And the only exception is Fajr, by consensus. The only exception is Fajr, and that is based on consensus, because if not, the hadith would enter Fajr as well. But when the Prophet said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, negligence is not that you sleep on a prayer. Negligence is when you delay one and don't pray it until the next one enters. So as long as you pray a salat before the next one enters, you are not what?
Negligent.
You are not negligent, because negligent is that you delay it till the next one enters.
Beyond its time.
And that's now no longer its time. Likewise, the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, "Man adraka rak'atan min as-subh qabla an tatlu'a ash-shams faqad adraka as-subh." So we know that the time you have until there is no longer enough to pray a rak'ah in that time period before you're considered negligent. So as long as you have prayed a rak'ah before the next time period enters, you haven't been negligent. And so Maghrib goes on all the way until Isha, right? How do we know that? Because of this hadith. And this hadith is general. Tafadhal.
So I have a real life example. So once I went to the masjid for Asr, and I was out after that going to a shop, and I come home and my wife had fallen asleep, and I found her praying Asr 2 minutes before Maghrib, right? So if she had squeezed in, I believe I saw her squeeze in one rak'ah at least. So would she have made this on time, for example?
Abu Mus'ab, he said that Malik narrated to us on the authority of who? قال مالك عن زيد بن أسلم ها عن عطاء بن يسار و بسر بن سعيد والأعرج يحدثونه عن أبي هريرة رضي الله تعالى عنه من أدرك ركعة من العصر من الصبح قبل أن تطلع الشمس فقد أدرك الصبح ومن أدرك ركعة من العصر قبل أن تغرب الشمس فقد أدرك العصر. So if she caught a rak'ah in its totality,
Yeah.
with ikhtilaf, before the sun set, then she caught asr. But the thing that we understand in all of this is that we still have a problem. When Jibril alayhi salatu wasalam prayed with the Prophet, he only prayed, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he only prayed Maghrib the same time both days. Why is that? For this reason, we say it is a strong opinion that you cannot delay Maghrib. It's a strong opinion that you cannot delay Maghrib without an excuse. And Ibn Abdul Barr, he goes into extreme detail explaining this. He says it has never been known from the Muslims anything other than that. Throughout the centuries, it hasn't been known that the Muslims would delay Maghrib. Right? When you look at Fajr, is there conversations about delaying Fajr?
Yeah.
Right? You got the Jamhur versus the Ahnaf. When it comes to Dhuhr, is there conversations about delaying Dhuhr?
Yeah.
Right? You got when it's summertime, you delay it past to cool down. When it comes to Asr, is there conversations about delaying Asr?
Nafs al-shay.
You got the ikhtilaf between the Jamhur and the Ahnaf. When it comes to Isha, is there conversations about delaying Isha? Right? Innaha la waqtaha. Right? This is the right time to delay it, ma lam tanam. Right? But Maghrib, has there ever come any conversation where some people say delay Maghrib?
No.
And so here it becomes one of those things that we say it's very strong to not delay Maghrib.
Yeah.
But we won't go as far to say that the salat of the one who did it is invalid. Are they deficient? Are they sinning? Some people will even say they're sinning.
Oh.
But is the salat invalid? They say no because of the hadith that we mentioned, that there is no negligence, and that would even remove the sin, perhaps. Right? And for this reason, we know that this is the stronger opinion, because if a woman comes off of her period by one rak'ah before Isha comes in, we say to her what?
Like we're doing prayer.
She has to pray Maghrib. And if Maghrib only had the one time, we would say to her she doesn't have to pray. Just like the woman who comes off of her period one rak'ah after sunrise. What do we say to her?
You missed the prayer.
You don't have to do anything. Just bathe, and when Dhuhr comes in, pray. Because she came in after the time.
Oh yeah, after.
So the point of it is that understand that the times have a waqtu ikhtiyar, a preferable time, and a waqt dhurura, a necessary time. And the meaning of necessary time is it is not acceptable or it is not suitable to not pray it at that moment without excuse. Right? When they say waqt dhurura, right? The waqt dhurura might be a long period of time. How is it dhurura if I have more than enough time to pray it? What it means that in the waqt of choice, the waqt of option, waqt al-ikhtiyar, the preferable time, pray it now, pray it 5 minutes from now, pray it 15 minutes from now, it's all optional. The waqt of necessity, waqt al-dhurura, pray it now. What, I got more time, pray it now. You see what I'm saying? That option is no longer there for you. We tell you to do it right now, even though there's more time. And then you have the waqt al-wujub, the time when it becomes mandatory for you to stop what you're doing and pray right now. And that is when?
Maghrib.
When there is only a raka'at left of the time.
Oh.
Right? When there is only a raka'at left, or enough time, because there's ikhtilaf in the raka'at, when there's only enough time to establish the salah in the amount of time that's left. And so in this hadith, he says, وَأَنْ صَلَّ الْمَغْرِبِ وَأَنْ صَلَّ الْمَغْرِبِ إِذَا غَرَبَتِ الشَّمْسِ وَأَخِّرِ الْإِشَاءِ مَا لَمْ تَنَمْ صح؟ وَأَخِّرِ الْإِشَاءِ مَا لَمْ تَنَمْ. Here, we go back to the hadith of Nafi' فَمَنْ نَامَ فَلَا نَامَتْ عَيْنُ. He said in his hadith, وَالْعِشَاءِ وَأَخِّرِ الْإِشَاءِ إِلَى ثُلُثِ اللَّيْلِ, and delay Isha up until the third of the night. The third of the night is the view of a large group of scholars that is the limit of Isha. Play. First question. What is the night? We talked about it before. The night is from Maghrib till Fajr. So when calculating the night, we have to start with Maghrib. And so, for example, we see that our Maghrib comes in at 6:08 and our Fajr comes in at 6:09. So where we are right now in the year, our night is exactly how many hours? 12. 1/3 of 12 is 4. So from 6:08 to 12:08, for the people who say that the 1/3 of the night is the limit, would stop it there. The 1/3 of the night is the limit, they would stop it there. وَأَخِرَ الْإِشَاءِ مَا لَمْ تَنَمْ. Let's go back to that one. وَالْعِشَاءِ وَأَخِرَ الْإِشَاءِ إِلَى ثُلُثِ اللَّيْلِ. No, وَالْعِشَاءِ وَأَخِرَ الْإِشَاءِ إِلَى ثُلُثِ اللَّيْلِ. No, what's the hadith? وأخر الإشاء إلى ثلث الليل. أبي سهيل وأخر الإشاء إلى ثلث الليل.
وأخر الإشاء ما لم تنام.
That's نافع. وأخر الإشاء ما لم تنام. أبي سهيل وأخر الإشاء ما لم تنام. نعم صحيح. والنافع was والعشاء إذا غاب الشفق. نعم جزاكم الله خير. والعشاء إذا غاب والعشاء إذا غاب الشفق. طيب, let's start off first with the name, al-Isha. Al-Isha min al-Ashi. And al-Ashi is a time period that includes Maghrib. That's why they used to call it al-Isha'ain, the two Ishas. For the sake of fa'idah, and I know time is getting tight, I want to finish these hadith today, so that's why. For the sake of fa'idah, قال ابن فارس في مقاييس اللغة. A dictionary that every student of knowledge should get familiar with is مقاييس اللغة. It's one of the better dictionaries. Ibn Faris, he takes the letters, the origin, the root letters, and then he breaks them down from that. So he says, عشوة العين والشين والحرف المعتل أصل صحيح. The ain and the sheen in this weak letter is a valid word structure. This is a valid word structure. يدل على ظلام وقلة وضوح في الشيء. These letters, what do they represent? Darkness and an unclarity of something. And so when we talk about the word Isha and Ashi, Bukratan wa Ashiya, right? It is a dark, and we're going to see this later on when we get to the hadith of who? The hadith of Anas. I'm sorry, the hadith of Muhammad ibn al-Qasim ibn Abi Bakr. ما أدركت الناس إلا وهم يصلون الظهر بالعشي. It's a problem now. What is he talking about? Right? So, this word, ashi, it comes from darkness and a lack of clarity in something. He says, ثُمَّ يُفَرَّعُ مِنْهُ مَا يُقَارِبُهُ مِنْ ذَلِكَ الْعِشَاء. And then it is branched from this word, words that are similar to it. From it is al-Isha. And it is the beginning of the darkness of night. So the word Isha is from the beginning of the darkness of night. And when does night begin to get dark? At Maghrib. And so they use this word Ashi or Isha for Maghrib and Isha. And then because Maghrib had its own term, they used to use the word Isha to refer to the later one, the later of the two Ishas, the later of the two dark salat. Because every other salat is prayed when? In the light. The only salat that is prayed in the dark is Maghrib and Isha, right? طيب. There's another term that they would use for Isha, and that is al-Atama, right? As in the hadith of the hadith of Umar from Hisham ibn Urwa and Abihi and Umar ibn al-Khattab. And al-Atama is the deep darkness. Al-Atama is the deep darkness, right? Let's go back to that. I wanted to come. Some of them used to dislike using the term Atama, right? Some of them used to dislike using the term al-Atama. وإن لم أكن مخطئا قد بوب عليه البخاري رحمه الله تعالى في صحيحه. And unless I'm mistaken, I believe al-Bukhari mentioned a chapter about that in his book, those who dislike using the term Atama. In any circumstance, the word Atama, as we said, it comes from deep darkness. If we look at the same dictionary, Maqayis al-Lugha, Ibn al-Faris, he says, Al-Ain wa-ta wal-mim aslun sahi. The Ain and the Ta and the Mim are a solid foundation that point or that reference the slowness of something or holding back from something, right? He says that Khalil al-Farahidi, he says, Atama rajul or attama rajul yu'attimu idha kaffa an shay. Right? You say a person held back if he didn't do something after starting to do it. He says, وَفِي الْحَدِيثِ أَنَّ رَسُولَ اللَّهِ صَلَى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ غَرَسَ كَذَا وَدِيَّةً فَمَا عَتَّمَتْ مِنْهَا وَدِيَّةً. He says, وَقَالَتْ لَيْسَ أَنَ الْقُرْآنِ كَمْ بِعَاتٍ وَيُقَالُ أَعْتَمَ الْقَوْمِ إِذَا صَارُوا فِي ذَلِكَ الْوَقْتِ. He says, وَقَالَ لَيْسَتْ فِي الْقُرْآنِ الْكَرِيمِ بِعَاتِمٍ وَلَيْسَتْ بِوَقَافٍ إِذَا خَيْلُ أَحْجَمَتْ. He says, well, Atama is the third of the night after the sun sets and the shafaq, right? So the usage of the word Atama is from the third of the night. Huwa thuluth al-awwal min al-layl. The first third of the night, calculating from when the sun sets and the horizon. So when they use the term al-Atama, it is that last third of the night. The reason they say that some of them used to dislike calling Salat al-Isha Atama is because it means to not do something. Right? Did you pray to not do nothing? Did you pray Salat don't do nothing? And they said, no, call it Salat al-Isha. The point of it is that, so all of these are terms that we're going to see in this hadith. Isha, from darkness, and Atama, when they use it for the first third of the night. And for that reason, in this narration, he says, in the narration of Nafi', he said, وَالْعِشَاء إِذَا غَابَ الشَّفَقِ. وَالْعِشَاء إِذَا غَابَ الشَّفَقِ. The shafaq is that horizon where there's still hues and tones in the sky, and there are two shafaq. There is al-shafaq al-ahmar wal-shafaq al-abyad or al-asfar. The majority, when we talk about the majority, the Hanabila, the Maliki, the Shafi'iyya, they say the shafaq that is being referenced for the end of Maghrib and the beginning of Isha is the red in the sky. When the red and the pink leave the sky, then this is the end of Maghrib and the beginning of Isha, right? So it's at a time where the stars might not be out yet, and it's still light because you still see the pink and the red in the sky. And so that is the shafaq with them. With the Ahnaf, they say either ghab al-shafaq is when the yellow or the white leaves the sky to where there is no more light left in the sky. And so you find them being the opposite with Maghrib than they are with Fajr. For them, the Ahnaf, as we're going to say, they pray Fajr when? Bil Isfar, when it is bright outside, when the red has entered the sky. And the majority, they pray Fajr when it's what? When there's no light in the sky, bi ghalas. And then on the opposite, the majority, they pray Isha when there is still light in the sky. In the Ahnaf, they pray Isha when there is no light in the sky. وَفِي هَذَا مُشَابَهَةٌ لِلشِّيعَةِ, because the Shia, they used to pray Maghrib إِذَا اشْتَبَكَ النُّجُومُ, when the stars would come out. Right? They would pray Isha when the stars come out. That's why if you ever lived in a country where there's Shia, you'll notice that their adhan for Maghrib is probably like 15 to 30 minutes after Ahl Sunnah in that land. Right? Because they wait until the light goes away.
So is there a fast break?
Huh?
They're fast breaking as well, I believe.
Potentially. Yeah, they pray Fajr later as well, yes. The point, yeah, of course, we're talking about Maghrib. Yeah, they're fast breaking is later. Naam, so the point of it is that the hadith of Umar, he says, إِذَا غَابَ الشَّفَقِ. The first thing we have to understand is that there's two meanings of shafaq, or different disagreement about what is the shafaq. But this from Umar in the hadith of Nafi would be the beginning time. إِذَا غَابَ الشَّفَقِ. In the hadith of Abi Suhail, he says, وَأَخِّرِ الْإِشَاءِ مَا لَمْ تَنَمْ. And delay Isha as long as you don't go to sleep. What does this mean? Delay Isha as long as you don't go to sleep. This is where you see scholars start disagreeing based on whatever hadith they're using. The people who say that there's no delay until the next salat enters, they say the statement of Umar means what? Pray as late as you want, as long as you haven't fallen asleep yet. Right? Pray it as late as you want. 12 o'clock for us right now today. 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, malam tenam, as long as you don't go to sleep.
Wow.
Right? Because when is negligence? Negligence is that you delay one salat to the next. The people that say that the end of the time is a third or a half, they say no, the statement of Ibn Umar does not mean that. Delay salat as long as you don't fall asleep. What he means is Allah. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. La ilaha illallah. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. 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 Allahu Akbar. Now, so where are we at? Now, so the people who say that it's a half, meaning some of them say that the end of the time of Dhuhr is half of the night. So for us, half of the night from 6 to 6 would be 6 hours would be 12. And for those that say it's a third of the night would be 10, right? So for them, the people that say that the end of Salat al-Isha is a third of the night, you say you can't pray past 10:08. After that, you didn't pray Isha on time. What have you said down? The people that say you have until half of the night, they say you have until midnight, 12:08. And then the people that say you have until Fajr, they say you have until Fajr, 6:07 or 6:09, right? And so all of these are various opinions. Here in the statement of Umar, وَأَخِّرَ الْإِشَاءَ مَا لَمْ تَنَمْ, the different groups will carry the opinion, or should I say, will apply this statement according to their opinion. And so, أَخِّرَ الْإِشَاءَ مَا لَمْ تَنَمْ, it's like he says, you can pray Isha as late as you want, as long as you haven't fallen asleep. Why as long as I haven't fallen asleep? Because the Prophet ﷺ used to dislike sleeping before Isha and talking after it. And this is the meaning of the statement of Umar in the previous hadith, in the statement of Abu Hurairah in the hadith to come. فَمَنْ نَامَ فَلَا نَامَتْ عَيْنُ. So whoever sleeps, then may his eye not sleep. And this is because this is a dua against them, that they find enjoyment in their sleep if they do so before Isha. Let their sleep be the sleep of the individual who is preoccupied and bothered and uncomfortable. And in it is a showing of the knowledge of the Sahaba, فَلَا نَامَتْ عَيْنُ, then may his eye not sleep. Because it shows you that, like I like to look at it, as their understanding of, right, that REM sleep, that deep sleep, that you find the eye of the individual while he's sleeping doing its own thing, right? If you look at the eyes of a person while he's asleep and he's in deep sleep, you'll find his eyes moving and doing things. And it's as if the eye is asleep, i.e. he's gotten the comfort in his sleep to where his eye is doing something on its own. But the one who isn't, he doesn't reach that REM sleep, he doesn't reach that enjoyable sleep, he doesn't get that motion in his eye. فَلَا نَامَتْ عَيْنُ. He's preoccupied like one who is bothered with his dunya or something like that, where he can't sleep. So this is the meaning of the dua in the hadith of Nafi, فَلَا نَامَتْ عَيْنُ. In the dua of Abu Hurairah, as far as the repetition of the dua of Umar, then they say that perhaps this is a following of the example of the Prophet ﷺ. And indeed, this statement, فَلَا نَامَتْ عَيْنُ, is a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ has been reported that he said, مَنْ نَامَ قَبْلَ الْعِشَاءِ فَلَا نَامَتْ عَيْنُ, right? Okay, مَا قَالَ صلى الله عليه وسلم. If I'm not mistaken, it's with Daraqutni, but I could be mistaken right there. But it is attributed to the Prophet that he said this statement, فَلَا نَامَتْ عَيْنُ. But in any circumstance, Abu Hurairah and Umar have said it, and they say that the repetition of Umar is to emphasize it, to show how bad it is. And like we called that the other day, sleeping before Isha, we called it what? Aylula. Because it produces sicknesses and weaknesses in the body. And this is something that,
3 or 4.
What do you mean?
Qaylula,
You got Haylula,
Qaylula,
Qaylula, Faylula, and Aylula. But the Aylula, you notice it if you ever slept before Isha. You'll notice that your body wakes up, yani ka'ib, exhausted, filthy the way you feel. You feel bad if you sleep after Maghrib and then you wake up for Isha. And they say it produces a sickness and a weakness and a feebleness in the body. Well, they said that it could be ba'id. And that's not something hard to believe, because the Prophet ﷺ wouldn't have recommended against it without there being a purpose. That being the case, it is not haram. But it is something that the Salaf used to discourage. Instead, the Prophet ﷺ used to dislike it. And some of them say it is haram, but the stronger opinion is that some of the Salaf, they used to do it. So, but the statement, وَأَخِّرِ الْإِشَاءَ مَا لَمْ تَنَمْ, from them are those that say you have all the way until Isha, until Fajr. Other of them say you have until a third. And that is the hadith of Umar and the hadith of Hisham. وَصَلِّ الْعَتَمَ وَصَلِّ الْعَتَمَ ما بينك وبين ثلث الليل فإن نمت فإلى شطر الليل ولا تكن من الغافلين. Right? And, وإن أخرت أحسن الله عليكم وإن أخرت. That Umar ibn Khattab, he said, وصل العتمة, أي صل الصلاة العشاء العتمة. And we said al-atama is that what? The first third of the night, starting from the setting of the sun and the coming of the shafaqa ila thuluth al-layl. And so that's the meaning of that hadith in the hadith of Hisham ibn Urwa. وَصَلِّ الْعَتَمَ مَا بَيْنَكَ وَبَيْنَ ثُلُثِ اللَّيْلِ. Right? Because that's the time of atama. وَإِنْ أَخَرْتْ إِلَى شَطْرِ اللَّيْلِ. And so here the scholars disagree. does Umar hold the view that Isha is until the third, or that Isha is until the half? Right? And the same thing about Abi Hurairah, right? وصل العشاء ما بينك وبين ثلث الليل فإن نمت فإلى نصف الليل. Right? فإن نمت. In the hadith of Abi Hurairah, صح? No. فإلى نصف الليل. So the point of it is that they start to disagree here, the half or the third. And the khulasa of it, in the view that I adopt, is the time for Isha starts at the leaving of the shafaq, or the coming of the shafaq, right? إذا غاب الشفق, right? إذا غاب الشفق, the leaving of the shafaq. Al-Ahmar, the red shafaq. And that's when you can start praying Isha. The best time to pray Isha is to delay it until the end of the first third. So Isha, the best time of Isha is not in the beginning, but to the end of the first third. So for example, today is 6. The best time to pray Isha would be at 10, right? The end of the first third. And that's because the Prophet ﷺ, he said, إِنَّهَا لَوَقْتَهَا. Indeed, this is its time. لَوْلَا أَشُقَّ عَلَى أُمَّتِي. If it wasn't for the fact that I would make things hard on my ummah. So the best time to pray Isha is the latest part of the first third. And the time period of ikhtiyar, the time of choice, is from its beginning until halfway through the night. And everything after halfway through the night is waqt dhurura, right? But a person is not negligent until they delay it after Fajr came in. And for that woman, if a woman comes off of her period in the middle of the night, we tell her she must take a bath and pray Isha. And that's why the Sahabiyat, now you find the value in their statement, we wouldn't get up at night to see. If a woman was on her period, is it from the sunnah to get up at night and check? They say we would not get up in the middle of the night and check, right? And that makes sense when you understand, because if they find out that they came off of their period in the middle of the night, they would have to pray Isha. But from the sunnah of the woman during the time of the Prophet is that they wouldn't get up in the middle of the night to check. If they got up, and they got up, and if they weren't on their period, they weren't on their period. But they wouldn't purposely get up at night to check. And all of this goes back to show us what? That all of these things are approximations. All of these things are approximates. But inside of this approximation, there is an effort that needs to be placed, and there is a diligence that needs to be done, and there is a recognition of these times that needs to be observed. In the hadith of Abi Hurairah, he says the same thing that's already transpired. والعشاء وصل العشاء ما بينك وبين ثلث الليل فإن نمت فإلى نصف الليل نعم فمن نام فلا نامت عينه.
Just فلا نامت.
فلا نامت عينه. نعم. And some of them don't have that addition in the hadith of Abi Hurairah. And some of the versions of the Muwatta, I think Yahya, he doesn't have that addition. فلا نامت عينه on Abi Hurairah. The hadith of Umar, we'll take the hadith of Hisham first. ولا تكن من الغافلين. وصل العتمة ما بينك وبين ثلث الليل وإن أخرت في إلى شطر الليل ولا تكن من الغافلين. This shows us that al-ghafla is to let the time pass its most preferable time. And the ghafla is after the half. فإن أخرت وإن أخرت في إلى نصف الليل ولا تكن من الغافلين. And don't be from those who are heedless and negligent, letting it get past half of the night before you prayed. And this is the meaning of the statement of Umar, وَأَخِّرِ الْعِشَاء مَا لَمْ تَنَمْ. And delay Isha as long as you don't go to sleep, i.e., as long as you don't go to sleep, pray it as late as possible before the last third or the last half or the first half, the first third or the first half, as long as you don't let it go past that. In the narration of Abi Suhail and Malik and Umar ibn al-Khattab كتب إلى أبي موسى, he said, وَقْرَأْ فِيهَا بِسُورَتَيْنِ طَوِيلَتَيْنِ من المفصل. And read, وصل الصبح والنجوم بادية. وصل الصبح والنجوم, no, there's no صلي there, is it? والصبح. وصل الصبح والنجوم بادية. وصل الصبح والنجوم بادية. بادية يعني ظاهرة. The stars are out. The stars are out. And like this, we see it in the hadith of Abi Hurairah, وصل الصبح بغلس. There are three words here, and I'm trying to finish up before the time leaves so we can finish all of these hadiths so we don't have to come back to them next time. Different muwatta'at, the different muwattas, they report this hadith of Abi Hurairah differently. وصل الصبح بغبش. غين با شين. Some of them report it بغبس. غين با سين. And some of them report it بغلس. غين lam sin. And each of these times is close to the other, but the order of the time is based on the harshness of the word. And this is something that you see that the Arab do. And they call this al-ishtiqaq, right? And Ibn al-Jinni, he has a book where he talks about the science of related words and how every word that shares letters or sounds shares the meaning, right? And this is an amazing science to really get deep into. But you'll find that the severity of the meaning is based on the severity of the word. So which of these three words is harder? Ghabash, ghabis, ghalis.
I think Qabash.
Ghabash, right? It sounds harder.
Yeah.
And ghabash is the day when it mixes with night. Or on the other end, the end of the night. So ghabash can be from Maghrib when the night starts to come in. And on the other side, it can be from when the night ends, when the night is over. After ghabash, you have ghabas. And ghabas is the time period after ghabash. And it is when the night ends and the day starts and the two of them start to mix. And then you have ghalas. And ghalas is only the mixing of the daylight, or should we say the mixing of the night with the daylight. So ghalas is only before Fajr. You can't say ghalas on the Maghrib side of the spectrum. You can say ghabash on the Maghrib side of the spectrum. There's daytime and darkness starts to come into it. But ghalas is it's nighttime and daylight starts to come into it. You can only use ghalas on the Fajr side. And if you look, I've been doing this recently. If you're out, like it's been, last week. The ghalas was from around 6:05, 6:10 till about 6:20. And the sky looks black, but blue. You might not see the definition of the khayt, al-abyad min al-khayt al-aswad. It's there, but you might not see it because of where the horizon is for you. But if you look up at the sky won't be black. It'll have a bluish tint in it. Almost like that though, but a little bit darker from a distance. And if you go out and look, you can see it even with the street lights. The sky, it'll be black, but it'll be a little bit blue in it. That is the ghalas. When the nighttime starts to mix with the day. It's like if you had a hot bath and you put some cold water in it and it becomes warm. If you have pitch black and you draw blue on it, it'll start lightening up. And that's the ghalas. It's still dark. And if there wasn't for street lights and buildings and things like this, it'd be dark. You wouldn't be able to see anything, i.e. the details and the definitions. But the sky has a little tint of light in it. And so that's what these words mean. Al-ghabish wal-ghadlas. Wal-ghabis, all of them is the mixing of dark and light together. The difference is that ghabish and ghabis can go on both sides, and they are the earlier ones. And ghalis is the later one, and it's only on the Fajr side. And so in the narration of Abi Hurairah, he says, وَصَلَّ الْعِشَاء وَصَلَّ الصُّبْحِ بِغَلَس. Right? And that's Why Umar says, وَالنُّجُومْ بَادِيَةٌ, and the stars are out. In another version, he says, وَالنُّجُومْ بَادِيَةٌ مُشْتَبِكَةٌ, the stars are out and intermingled. You can still see an abundance of stars in the sky, if not for all the light pollution we have in our cities, right? وَالنُّجُومْ بَادِيَةٌ مُشْتَبِكَةٌ. And then he says in the narration of Abi Suhail, وَقْرَأْ فِيهِ بِسُورَتَيْنِ طَوِيلَتَيْنِ مِنَ الْمُفَصَّلِ, and read in it, i.e. in Salat al-Fajr, بِسُورَتَيْنِ, 2 surahs, i.e. after Surah al-Fatiha. In each rak'ah, read a surah, right? And these are things that are obvious, but people make mistakes about this. وَقْرَأْ فِيهِ أو وَقْرَأْ فِيهَا بِسُورَتَيْنِ طَوِيلَتَيْنِ, right? I.e. each surah after Fatiha. Not 2 surahs after Fatiha, not 2 surahs anywhere you want, right? Read a surah after Fatiha, and then in the next raka'ah, read a surah after Fatiha. وَقْرَأْ فِيهَا بِسُورَتَيْنِ طَوِيلَتَيْنِ, 2 of the longer surahs from the Mufassal. We don't have time to go into it as much as I wanted to, but know that the Quran has been divided up in several different ways. Most of us nowadays, when we talk about the way that the Quran is divided up, we talk about it being divided up into 30 juz, right? But the Sahaba, they used to divide the Quran up into 7 juz. Each juz equaling about about 4 to 5 juz of what we have now. And they used to refer to this tajzi'ah, to this dividing of the Quran, with the statement, Femi bishawq, right? My mouth desires. Femi bishawq. My mouth desires to recite the Quran like this. And Femi bishawq is a major ishtiqaq, right? When you take the letters of each surah to make a word, al-anhat, right? Like how we talk about UNICEF and USA or Daesh, right? These words, they take the first letter of every word to make another word. Yarmalun, Qatbu Jad, and Tajweed, right? So Femi bishawq is 7 juz that the Sahaba would use, and it would start with Fatiha, Fem. Mim would be Ma'idah. So you read from Fatiha and stop at Ma'idah. Mim, wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Mim would be Ma'idah, Femi, to Surah Yunus, which is the Ya. Femi, right? Ma'idah to Yunus. So you would stop before Yunus. Then you would start with Yunus, Femi, B. The Ba here is from Surah Bani Israel, Surah Subhan, Surah Al-Isra. Femi, B, Shawq. Sheen would be Surah Al-Shu'ara. Sheen would be Surah Al-Shu'ara. Waw would be Surah Was-Saffat. Surah Was-Saffat. And the Qaf would be Surah Al-Qaf, or Surah Qaf. This tajzi'ah, this dividing of the Quran, is how the Sahaba would read the Quran once every 7 days. And they call this tajzi'ah Femi bishawq. Another way that the Quran was divided is what is known as into the tiwal, the long surahs, which is Baqarah, Baqarah, Ali Imran, Ma'idah, Nisa, Al-An'am, and A'raf. As-Sab'u tiwal, the 7 long surahs. Then they would talk about them as the mi'een, the hundreds. Those surahs that their ayat are in the hundreds, close to, above, or below. And then they would talk about the mathani, those that are lesser than 100, but they're often repeated in the salat. And then they would talk about the mufassal. And there's a hadith about this, how the Prophet was given each of these sections of the Quran as a replacement or as a representative of what the other prophets were given in their books. The Torah, the Zabur, the Injil, and the Furqan was singled out with the mufassal. And they're called the mufassal because of the abundance of breaking them up with the statement, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. You break them up all the time by saying Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, i.e. they're short. And even though they're short, there are long mufassal. And the mufassal, some of them say they start with Surah Al-Hujurat, but the stronger opinion is that they start with Qaf to Naba. That is Tiwal al-Mufassal. And then the medium of the mufassal is from Naba, Amma yatasa'alun to ad-duha. These are the medium mufassal. And then the short or qisar mufassal are from duha to the end of the Quran. And so Umar is saying, وَقْرَأْ فِيهَا, yani read in Fatiha and Fajr, and الصبح بسورتين طويلتين من المفصل, with two long surahs from the mufassal, i.e. from Qaf, stopping before Naba, right? This is the sunnah to read in Fajr, but it's not necessary. And the Prophet would switch it up. In Maghrib, he would read the short mufassal, and in Isha, he would read the medium mufassal, and then in Dhuhr and Asr, likewise, the medium mufassal. And so like this, we've covered all of the hadith. The only thing that's left for next time is the rijal of the hadith of Hisham ibn Urwa and the hadith of Abi Hurairah, the rijal. And then after that, we'll go to the two narrations on Anas, inshallah. هذا وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على عبده ورسوله نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم.